The metal walls shudder like a beast in pain, each creak a promise of something worse than death. The air is wet and heavy, salted with sweat and fear, and every breath slices my lungs like knives. I press my forehead against the cold steel, counting the seconds between the rattles of the truck, but the numbers collapse in my head. Someone sobs in the dark. Someone whispers a prayer in a language I don't understand. I don't pray anymore. I just imagine my body dissolving, particle by particle, so that when the door opens there will be nothing left to drag out. The truck lurches. Screams ripple. Hands clutch at me, frantic, but I shove them away. When the locks snap, open the sound is a gunshot in my skull. Light floods the container, pale and merciless. Shadows of men move like wolves at the threshold, shouting orders. One girl bolts. Another is dragged by the hair. I feel my body sprint before my mind gives permission, bare feet slapping wet concrete, lungs tearing open, heart a drumbeat of survival. The dock smells of oil and iron and rain. I can taste freedom for a heartbeat before a hand like iron clamps my arm and yanks me backward so hard my vision bursts into white stars. I kick Clawbite. He laughs, low and bored, like I'm a stray dog. A needle flashes. I twist, but the sting hits my neck anyway, hot and fast. My scream fractures, cuts off. The world tilts. My knees collapse. Voices slide together into a single roar. The last thing I see is a man standing apart from the chaos, a silhouette framed by gunmetal sky, eyes like burning glass fixed on me as if I am the only one left. Then nothing. When I surface, the silence is so deep it feels alive. My skin is wrapped in softness, not grime. The air smells of lavender and clean water. For a moment I think I am dead, some cruel version of heaven, until I feel my wrists, no cuffs. My throat, no gag. My legs, bare, trembling but free. I open my eyes. The ceiling is high and white, the walls muted cream, sunlight folded through gauzy curtains. A bed. A real bed. My breath stutters. This is wrong. This is a new trap. I push myself up, heart hammering. The nightgown clings to me, soft and alien. I search for cameras, for locks, for chains hidden in the shadows. The door opens with a sigh and he fills it. Tall, broad shoulders under a black shirt, hands relaxed at his sides, but carrying the weight of someone who could break a neck with a single motion. His face is carved in quiet fury, but his voice when it comes is lower than I expect, smooth like dark liquor. You're safe. 2 words, nothing else. My stomach knots tighter. Safe. No one says that without meaning its opposite. I slide off the bed, feet searching the carpet for weapons. Who are you? My voice is a rasp, my body still fighting the poison in my blood. He steps inside, closes the door without looking at it. The click is soft but final. My name doesn't matter right now. His eyes are impossibly steady, blue so deep it could drown me. All you need to know is that I bought you last night. The words slam into me. Bought. My knees almost give. Bought me? I spit it back at him, a blade in my mouth. For what? He tilts his head slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. To get you out. A pause. To keep you alive. I laugh then, sharp and broken, because the world has no shortage of monsters who speak in riddles. That's what they all say. And then they take what they paid for. He doesn't flinch. You're not a thing. Not here. His voice is still low, but there's a pulse in it, something hard under velvet. You're in my house. No one touches you. I take a step toward him anyway, testing. And you? Will you touch me? His jaw tightens, a flicker in his eyes, something like hunger but restrained. Not unless you ask. The room tilts. My heart slams against my ribs. This is a new game, a dangerous one. I take another step, close enough to smell the faint trace of rain and smoke on his skin. Men like you don't save girls like me, I whisper. Men like you build the cages. He leans in just enough for his breath to brush my cheek. Maybe I built them, he says softly, but I know how to break them. He straightens before I can reply, turning toward the door. Rest. You're safe here. Again that word. Safe. He leaves me with it echoing in the air. a question I can't stop tasting. The door closes. I'm alone again. My pulse is still racing, but not only from fear. Something in me trembles where no man's touch ever reached. This house feels like a labyrinth, and the man who owns it feels like it's minotaur, terrible, magnetic, and maybe the only way out. I sink back onto the bed, fists gripping the sheets, trying to decide whether I've just been rescued or bought a new kind of prison.
I watched her through the security feed long after I left the room. Her hands pressed into the sheets like she was holding herself together. Her breath caught in her throat, ragged and unsure, and every movement, every twitch of muscle, every tilt of her chin, spoke of a girl who had learned to survive in silence and still didn't know how to believe she wasn't prey. I should have walked away, should have shut off the screen, let the house staff do what they're trained for. But I didn't. I stayed, because something in her refusal to break completely made me still. She was the last one in the container, the one I couldn't get to in time. I had planned the operation for weeks. I had people in place, weapons calibrated, everything timed to the second. And then, in the middle of the chaos, just as the girls were being pulled out as blood spilled from men who deserved it, she ran. Not toward us. Away. Into the dark. Into their hands. I saw her, barefoot, wild, already broken in ways I could feel across the distance. I saw her collapse, and I couldn't reach her. Not without blowing the whole thing. She was gone before I could stop it. And I made a decision, one I hadn't made before. I followed the trail. Tracked her to the place where they clean their mistakes, where girls who escape are punished, reshaped, rebranded. But she wasn't punished. She was preserved, set aside, saved for something higher. They had plans to sell her at a collector's auction, a private event for the worst kind of men, the ones who don't just want flesh, they want to own ruin. So I went, dressed the part, played the game, masked, silent, a card in my palm and a lie in my mouth. And when her number was called, I bid. High enough to win, low enough to raise suspicion. $10,000. That's what it cost to take her away. That's what it cost to put her here. In my house, under my protection, in a bed no one else would touch. But now she was watching me like I was no different from them. And maybe I wasn't. I left the surveillance room, every step echoing against marble, soft enough that even my thoughts felt loud. The hallway narrowed as I reached the wing she'd been placed in. Far from the staff, far from the world. I hesitated at her door. She wouldn't hear me approach, not with how carefully this place was built. For safety, for secrecy, for women like her. I didn't knock. I didn't enter. I waited. I listened. Inside, I heard her pacing. Light steps, cautious. She was testing the space, the silence. Then I heard her stop. Fabric brushing. Maybe she sat down. Maybe she curled into herself. I imagined her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tight, face pressed into her own skin. Like armor. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the doorframe. My uncle would kill me if he knew what I was doing. Not because I'd broken protocol, because I'd saved her, because I'd paid for her with his money, with the very funds he moved through those containers, believing no one in the family dared touch his side of the business. But I did. I touched it. I set it on fire from underneath, and now, she was the flame still burning in my hands. I finally knocked. Once. Softly. No response. Sienna. Her name. First time I said it aloud. It tasted heavier than I expected. Beautiful but scorched. I need to speak with you. A pause. Then footsteps. Careful. Closer. When the door opened, her body blocked the light from inside. She hadn't changed. Her hair was still tangled, her skin pale, eyes darker than before. But her spine was straight. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting, calculating. You lied, she whispered. No venom, just certainty. I held her gaze. I didn't lie. You said I was safe. You are. Her laugh was quiet, bitter. Safe doesn't come with a price tag. It does in this world. I said it slowly, each syllable exact, and I paid it. She stared at me, then stepped back, silent invitation or silent trap. I didn't know. I entered, the air between us thickening with every breath. She moved to the window, her profile outlined in pale blue light. I don't want your comfort, she said softly. I don't want kindness from a man who bought me. I didn't move closer. Then what do you want? Her voice barely rose. Truth. I took a breath. I bought you because the alternative was watching you disappear. Because the men in that room didn't see you. But I did. Because you ran barefoot through hell and didn't scream. Because when they grabbed you, you fought like your body was still yours. And because I couldn't stand the thought of you ending up with someone who'd never see any of that. Her eyes snapped to mine. That's not truth, she said. I took a step forward. Just one. No, that we try not to say too much. Because if I told you the truth, the whole of it, you'd never believe me. And I'm not ready to lose the only thing I've saved with my own hands. Her lips parted, but no words came. And for a moment, just one fleeting breath, we stood there, not as monster and girl, not as buyer and bought, but as two people who had seen too much, been too much, lost too much, and still, somehow were standing.
He spoke like someone who didn't know how to lie with his mouth, but had mastered it with silence. Each word left his lips wrapped in restraint, like he was holding back the very thing I was trying to pull out of him. I should have hated him for that. Should have turned away and let the cold swallow me whole. But I didn't. Because something about the way he looked at me, unflinching, unblinking, as if I were not fragile but flammable, made my skin ache in ways I hadn't felt since before I forgot I was human. I watched him from across the room, arms folded so tightly against my chest I could feel my own heartbeat press into bone. He didn't come closer, just stood there in the soft wash of twilight, like a shadow that had decided to wear a man's shape for the night. My throat tightened with the urge to scream, to demand answers, to strip every guarded layer from his voice until it bled truth. But I stayed quiet, because I'd learned long ago that silence could be a weapon more lethal than any scream. His presence filled the room without moving. My bare feet curled against the floor. My nightgown clung to my thighs. I didn't know how to breathe around him. Not properly. Not without remembering what it felt like to be watched with hunger disguised as charity. But his gaze wasn't hungry. It was controlled, careful, and that terrified me more than lust ever did. You keep saying I'm safe, I whispered, my voice thinner than I wanted, sharper than I meant. But all I feel is cornered. His jaw tensed like he wanted to correct me, but he didn't. Instead, his eyes softened, barely, and his voice dropped lower. That's because safety feels unfamiliar to someone who's only known survival. I hated how that sounded like truth. I hated that it made my spine tremble. I took a slow step toward him, not because I trusted him, but because I needed to see what he would do when I breached the air between us. He didn't move, just watched me with those icy blue eyes that never seemed to blink when it mattered. I stopped an arm's length away. You bought me, I said again, letting the word slice between us. You paid for me like an object, like a thing. So don't stand there acting like you're better than the others. He didn't flinch. I didn't say I was. You want me to believe you're different? I tilted my head, letting my hair fall like a curtain between us. Prove it. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not surprise, not anger. Something else. Sadness, maybe. Or memory. I'm not going to touch you, he said, softer now. No matter how many times you push me to. Why? The word left my lips before I could stop it. His response came like a secret. Because I know what it's like to be touched by someone who sees only what they want to take. I blinked. That wasn't the answer I expected. Do you think I don't want to? He asked, stepping forward just enough that I could feel the heat of his body, but not the contact. Do you think I don't feel it when you look at me like that, like you're begging me to break you, just so you can feel something that isn't numb? My breath caught. My chest tightened. You think I'm made of stone, Sienna? His voice dropped even lower, a blade wrapped in velvet. I'm not. I feel everything you throw at me. Every glance, every word, every moment you pretend to seduce me just to see if I'll take the bait. I swallowed, but it didn't help. He leaned in, close enough that his breath brushed my cheek, and I could smell the shadow of bourbon and winter on his skin. But I won't, because if I touch you now, it won't be for you. It'll be for me, and you deserve more than that. My skin ignited, flush with heat that had nothing to do with fear. I hated that my knees weakened. I hated that he could paralyze me without laying a single finger on me. But most of all, I hated that some dark, broken part of me didn't want him to stop. Do you always speak like that? I breathed. His lips curved, barely, Only when I'm standing in front of a woman who makes me forget every rule I've ever made for myself. I felt that in places no voice had ever reached. I could have kissed him right then. Could have stepped into that inch of space and pressed my mouth against his just to see if he tasted like he sounded. But I didn't, because something told me he wouldn't let me. Not yet. Instead, I turned my back to him, letting my hair slide like ink over my shoulders, letting silence speak where words would ruin it. He waited, and then quietly he left. And I stood alone, heart racing like I had just survived a fall I didn't remember choosing to take.
She didn't slam the door when I left. That was the part that stayed with me. No shouting. No accusation hurled behind my back. Just silence. Thick. Absolute. Like she'd carved herself out of the air, so I couldn't touch her even if I tried. And I had tried. God, I tried not to. But standing that close to her, inhaling the weight of her pain like smoke clinging to my lungs, how was I supposed to pretend I wasn't burning? I walked the corridors slower than usual. Every step a delay I didn't admit wanting. My fists clenched and unclenched at my sides, memory looping like a vice. Her voice, low and sharp. Her mouth trembling even when her chin didn't. The heat between us wasn't imagined. It was alive, breathing, pressing against my skin with all the hunger she wouldn't say out loud. And I couldn't give in. Not yet. Not until I knew she wanted me more than she wanted to prove something to herself. The hallway turned, dimly lit. The house had its secrets, rooms I never used, doors locked from both sides, corridors that led to places I hoped she'd never see. I kept her in the East Wing for a reason. Far from the ghosts. Far from my uncle's legacy. Far from the parts of this empire that still reeked of blood. My office waited like a confession booth. Dark wood, single lamp, documents scattered like sins. I sat behind the desk, pulled the drawer open. A flash drive. Simple. Black. Anonymous. I plugged it into the computer and watched the screen flicker to life. Surveillance footage, audio intercepts, coordinates. All related to the last raid. Her raid. Her name wasn't Sienna in the documents. Of course not. They'd erased it, replaced it with a tag number and a currency code. She wasn't listed under age or nationality. Just viable product, high aesthetic value, former resistance risk. My jaw tightened. My hand hovered over the delete key. I didn't press it. Not yet. I needed to remember who she had been to them. What I'd pulled her from. Why I'd failed to stop. A soft knock. Not the staff. Too gentle. I closed the file, minimized the screen. Come in. When the door opened, she was already halfway across the room. Barefoot again. That detail knocked the wind from me more than it should have. Her nightgown brushed her thighs with every step, white fabric glowing in the lamplight like a threat. Or a dare. I can't sleep, she said. No apology. No performance. Just that. I didn't move. What do you want from me, Sienna? She tilted her head, the strands of hair falling forward like shadows across her collarbone. What do you want me to want? The question was lethal. I leaned back in the chair, gaze locked on hers. Something real. She stepped closer. You don't think this is real? No, my voice dropped rough. I think you're testing me. I think you're still trying to find out what kind of monster I am. Her lips parted, but it wasn't in surprise. It was in surrender. And if I am? I stood, slowly, the desk no longer between us. Then I'll keep failing your tests until you believe me. She swallowed. Hard. Her chest rose, then felt like the world had gotten heavier. I didn't touch her. I let her walk the final inch. Her hands didn't reach for me. They stayed at her sides like she was holding herself back from unraveling. I didn't come here to seduce you, she whispered, eyes fixed on my mouth like she was already doing it anyway. I know, I said, but I also know you don't understand what you need. Then tell me. I stepped into her space, just enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold my gaze. You need to be seen, not claimed, not used, just seen. And I see you, Sienna, every shattered, furious inch of you. She trembled, just once. Her hand brushed my chest, not a caress, a test. Her fingers curled into the fabric, gripping like she didn't know whether to pull me closer or push me away. I don't know how to be touched, she breathed, without disappearing. Then let me teach you to stay. I thought she might cry. She didn't. She did something far more dangerous. She leaned in, but I caught her face between my hands, gently, firmly. Not tonight. The words were soft, kind, and they broke her open in the quietest way. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She stepped back, and for the first time, she looked safe. Not happy, not healed, but safe. She left the room in silence. And this time, I followed her with my eyes, not my hands.
The air in the hallway pressed against my skin like warm breath, heavy and silent, as if the house itself had paused to hear what I would do next. I walked barefoot, not out of choice, but instinct, as if the ground needed to feel me raw, unguarded, honest. Every step away from him felt like a string being pulled tighter behind my ribs, as though part of me hadn't wanted to leave that room at all. But I had, because he'd said no. And no one ever said no to me not like that. Not gently, not with reverence. I stopped halfway down the corridor, my back to the wall, heart pounding like it didn't know what to do with itself. I was trembling and I hated it. I hated how calm he had been, how still, how he'd looked at me not with lust, not with pity, but with something quieter, something that saw too much. He hadn't touched me, but I felt his hands everywhere. I still felt the echo of his voice on my skin, that sentence curling through my veins like smoke. Let me teach you to stay. I didn't want to stay. I wanted to run, but I was tired of running. So I stood there alone in the quiet hush of his house, letting the weight of what I almost did settle into my bones. He was supposed to be just another name, another mask, another man who bought me with blood on his hands. But he was something else, something worse. He was a mirror, and I hated that too. The next morning, the house woke before I did. I heard it moving, doors opening, footsteps gliding over marble, the hum of distant voices too low to understand. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows like melted gold, warm against my bare shoulders. I sat at the edge of the bed in the same thin nightgown, unsure if I was expected to dress, to leave, to speak. No one came. No one forced me. There was a tray on the small table near the door. Fruit. Warm bread. Something that smelled like rosemary and olive oil. It felt absurd. Offensive. I hadn't eaten like this since before my name stopped mattering. My stomach turned from habit, not hunger. I stood and pushed the curtains aside instead, revealing a view too beautiful to belong to a house like this. The garden stretched beyond the glass, neat and serene, untouched by anything cruel. Lavender, trees, a slow breeze carrying a peace I didn't trust. He found me there. I didn't hear him approach. He moved like shadow, like instinct. When I turned, he was already at the doorway, dressed in black, like always, tailored, restrained, immaculate. He said nothing, just stood there with the sun at his back, and looked at me like he'd already read the things I hadn't written. "I'm sending you somewhere," he said at last. His voice sounded more distant than usual, as if it was coming from behind a veil. "Somewhere you can rest. Be seen." My spine straightened. "You're sending me away?" "No," he said quickly, stepping closer. "I'm giving you space to decide if you want to stay." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. How generous. His jaw tightened. "You need more than I can give you here." I raised my chin. "And what do you think I need?" His reply came like a low thunder. "Time. Silence. A place where no one wants your body. Not even me." The honesty of it knocked the air from my lungs. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to kiss him. I didn't either. I folded my arms and met his stare. "You really think I can be fixed?" "No," his voice was quiet now. "But I think you were never broken." That made me blink. His eyes softened, only a fraction. "You survived things most people wouldn't. And you didn't turn to ash. You're still fire." I hated how that made something in me ache. He took a small black folder from behind his back and held it out. "The place is in Province. My sister runs it. No one will touch you. No one will ask who you were. They'll only care about who you want to become." I didn't take the folder. "I don't need therapy," I said flatly. "No," he said. "But maybe you need to know what it feels like to be somewhere no one expects anything from you." I stared at him, waiting for the twist, the offer, the command. But he didn't move. "I don't want your charity," I whispered. He shook his head once. "It's not charity. It's a door. You choose whether to walk through it." I still didn't reach for the folder. But later, when he left the room and I was alone again, I opened it. And the strangest part wasn't that I was leaving. It was that for the first time in years, someone had given me the choice.
I watched her through the tinted glass of the car as the plane lifted into the sky, a sliver of silver against the dawn. She hadn't looked back. Not once. Not at the house. Not at me. And I told myself that was good. That maybe it meant she was already reaching for something more than survival. But part of me burned. Because I didn't want her to look back. I wanted her to stay. The wind was sharp that morning, cleaner than usual, the kind of air that felt like absolution if you breathed it deep enough. But I didn't. I stood there on the edge of the gravel drive, coat undone, hands in my pockets, pretending the silence around me meant something had been resolved. It hadn't. It never does. Because when you rescue a girl like her, you don't get to forget her. You carry her with you, in the weight of every word she didn't say. Every breath she held instead of breaking. Every time she looked at you like she was waiting for you to prove her right. That you were just another man pretending not to be a wolf. I shouldn't have sent her away. But I had to. Not because I didn't want her near. I did. Desperately. But because I knew that if she stayed, I'd touch her too soon. And if I touched her too soon, I'd ruin her before she had the chance to remember what her body feels like without fear crawling beneath her skin. She needed distance. And so did I. But God, the echo of her voice stayed. Low, cracked, sharp with something she didn't yet understand. And that last look, before she turned, before she boarded, there had been something in it. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the beginning of something that might one day lead there. I saw it, and it undid me more than any scream ever could. 3 days passed. 3 days without the sound of her feet in the hall. Without the scent of her hair lingering in the guest wing. Without her silence pressing against mine like a secret waiting to collapse. I told myself I was doing the right thing, letting her breathe, letting her decide. But I was lying, because every hour she was gone, I wanted to go after her. Drag her back, hold her too tight, break every rule I built between us just to hear her whisper my name again. I tried to lose myself in the work, in the network, in the men I needed to dismantle quietly and permanently. I attended meetings, gave orders, bled into the cold machinery of my family's empire with the kind of precision that once made me untouchable. But nothing felt sharp anymore. Nothing held weight like she did. And the first letter arrived. No return address. No signature. Just a small envelope with the faintest scent of lavender. And inside, 4 words. No one touched me. I stared at it for an hour, holding it like it might shatter. I don't know why it undid me so completely. Maybe because it was the closest thing to trust she'd ever given me. Or maybe because it meant she knew I'd been thinking about it. About her. About what could have happened. And what didn't. I kept that letter in my inner coat pocket like a weapon. 2 days later, another envelope. I didn't sleep with the lights on. That one made me smile. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I knew if I wrote even a word, I'd get in the car, on the plane, at her door before the ink dried. So I stayed still. I waited, and I read those sentences again and again until they became prayers. On the 7th day, I received nothing. And that silence, sharp, unexpected, sliced deeper than it should have. Until the phone rang. My sister's voice was calm, but I heard the edge in it. "You should come," she said. "She asked for you." I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. My heart was already running faster than my body could follow. By the time I landed, it was late. Province was dust-drenched, quiet in that golden way that makes everything feel fragile. The center was tucked behind olive groves and stone paths, candlelight in the windows, shadows in the corners. I walked through the front door without knocking, the staff parting in silence as they recognized me. No one asked why I was there. They all knew. She was waiting in the garden, barefoot again, always barefoot. I stepped into the night air, and she turned before I could speak. Her eyes met mine across the distance, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid. "Dante," she said, like the syllables didn't taste like salt anymore. I moved toward her slowly, like the gravity between us was shifting, drawing me in. "You came," she whispered. "I always will," I said. She took a step closer, but I didn't close the gap. Not yet, because this time I needed her to decide if she wanted me there or needed me gone.
I should have been more careful with hope. It's not something I know how to hold properly. It burns too hot in my chest, like a fever I didn't ask for. And yet, when I saw him in the garden, standing there like a storm wrapped in stillness, like someone who'd been waiting for me longer than I deserved, I let it in. Just a little. Just enough to make me ache in places that had been numb for years. He didn't speak first. Of course he didn't. Dante is made of silence and control, of tension so tightly wound you could play it like a string. And I'm chaos pretending to be composed. We don't match. We collide. I took another step, barefoot on cold stone, feeling the sting with every shift of weight. But I didn't stop. I wanted to see if he'd flinch, if he'd reach for me, if he'd try to protect something I didn't know how to offer. You're late, I said, but my voice came out too soft to be sharp. I didn't know you wanted me, he answered, and there was something in the way he said it that made my knees threaten betrayal. Not desire. Not exactly. Something more dangerous, longing. I looked away, because if I kept staring, I might say something I couldn't undo. The lavender behind him moved with the wind, quiet and untouched, like the whole earth had decided to lower its voice. I sent you letters, I murmured. I read them all, he said. Every night. Even the one I didn't send. His eyes darkened, and I felt the answer before he gave it. Especially that one. I turned back to face him. Then you know I'm not better. No, he said, stepping closer. You're not better, but you're not lost. I hated how easily he said that. Like he believed it. Like he believed in me. Do you think about touching me? I asked suddenly, breath shallow, the question pulling itself out of me like something feral. He didn't look away. Every time you breathe, the air between us snapped tight. My skin prickled. My pulse betrayed me, thundering through my throat like it wanted to drown the silence. And yet, I whispered, you never do. His jaw flexed, slow and deliberate, like he was holding back something dangerous. Because you don't ask me to. I stepped into him. 1 inch. Just enough to feel the warmth rising off his skin. I wasn't playing this time. I wasn't testing. I wasn't proving anything. I was just there. Wanting. I don't know how I breathed. His voice came low, like heat curling in a locked room. Then let me show you what it sounds like. My hand moved before my mind caught up. I reached out, touched the front of his shirt, the fabric soft beneath my fingers, the beat of his heart steady under my palm. This is me asking, I said. Not with my body. With what's left of me. Dante exhaled like he'd been holding that breath since the night we met. And still, he didn't touch me. Say it, he said gently. I need to hear you say it. Touch me, I whispered. Please. He moved so slowly I could feel the shift of the air before his hands even reached me. One rested at my jaw, the other slid behind my neck, his thumb brushing the edge of my ear like a promise. I tilted into it, eyes closed, not because I was afraid, but because for once I wasn't. His lips didn't crush mine. They hovered, brushed, then pressed. Careful, reverent, devastating. My hands climbed his chest on their own, fingers curling in the soft fabric, holding him like he was the only solid thing in a world I never trusted. He kissed me like I was sacred, like I was breakable and unbreakable at once, like he'd waited 1,000 years for a moment that might only last a second. And I kissed him back like I'd finally stopped running. His breath caught when I opened my mouth to him, and I felt his control flicker. Just enough to know I wasn't alone in the storm. I tasted every ounce of restraint on his tongue, felt it in the way he gripped the back of my neck, just a little harder, as if reminding himself I was real. When he finally pulled away, I didn't let go. I don't know what this is, I said, voice raw, but I want it. Dante rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm and ragged. So do I. And there, in the garden, with the moon rising behind us and the earth quiet beneath our feet, I didn't feel bought. I didn't feel broken. I felt like someone who had been chosen, not for what I'd survived, but for who I might still become.
She tasted like rain on scorched earth, like something once ruined, now blooming from ash. I had imagined her kiss in every quiet hour since I first saw her, bruised, barefoot, and burning with defiance. but nothing prepared me for the softness of her mouth or the sharp surrender in her breath. It wasn't lust that moved me when I kissed her. It was reverence, a hunger that bent at the altar of something sacred. And it terrified me, because I didn't just want her. I wanted to be the first man she didn't have to survive. She didn't pull away when I broke the kiss. She held on like she wasn't ready to let the moment end, like she was afraid the world outside that garden would steal it from her. I kept my hands on her, one still resting against her neck, the other pressed to the small of her back, anchoring us in the hush between heartbeats. Sienna, I whispered her name like a vow, like a warning. You don't have to prove anything to me. Her eyes didn't flinch. I'm not trying to. Then tell me what this is, I asked, searching her face for hesitation, for fear, for the cracks I wasn't allowed to ignore. Tell me why you're standing this close and not running. She was quiet for a breath. 2. Then her voice slipped out low, nearly lost in the wind. Because I'm tired of feeling untouched and unloved in my own skin. That broke something in me. I stepped back, just enough to clear my thoughts, just enough to breathe. Because if I touched her again, I wouldn't be able to stop. And I needed to stop. Not because I didn't want her, God, I wanted her, but because this wasn't about wanting. This was about deserving, about trust, about whether her body was ready to mean something different. But she followed, closed the gap again. I don't know how to ask, she said, her voice trembling. But I'm asking anyway. I swallowed hard. You want me to touch you? She nodded. Like a man. I asked. Or like a mirror? Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, are you asking me to love you? Or to reflect the parts of you that still believe you're broken? She exhaled like it hurt. I don't know. Then I won't touch you like that, I said, voice tight with the ache I refused to release. Not until you do. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. Not in anger, in shame. And that made it worse. So I stepped forward again, gently, slowly, until we were breathing in the same space. My fingers brushed the line of her jaw, light as smoke, just enough for her to feel the weight of choice. But I can hold you, I whispered, if you want that. I can hold you until you remember what it feels like to belong to yourself. Her eyes shimmered. No tears, just the threat of them. Then, wordlessly, she nodded. I opened my arms, and she stepped into them like she was walking into fire. Her cheek found my chest, her arms wrapped around my waist, and I wrapped her in silence. Not as a man staking claim, but as someone offering sanctuary. We stood there for what felt like a lifetime. Wind slipping through the lavender, dusk folding in around us like silk. Her body softening slowly, breath by breath, tension melting into something looser, sadder, more human. She pulled back just enough to look up at me. Her lips barely parted. How do you do that? Do what? Make me feel here, in this body, like I don't need to run out of it. I reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Because I'm not here to take it. I'm just here to remind you it's yours. Something shifted in her expression then. A crack, a glow, something unspoken but seen. Come inside, I said, voice soft. Let me make you tea. She smirked, the corner of her mouth tugging up. That's the least sexy thing I've ever heard you say. Good, I replied. You scare me when you want sexy. She laughed, quiet and real. And for the first time since she stepped into my world, I heard joy in her throat instead of survival. She took my hand, and we walked inside, together, slowly. No tension in the steps. No need to look back. No need to rush. Just her fingers brushing against mine like a question she was finally ready to ask with time.
I hadn't realized how quiet my body had become until he touched me without asking for anything in return. Not for obedience, not for arousal, not for proof. Just the simplest version of touch, presence, breath, heat. And it ruined me. Because now I knew what it could feel like when a man's hands didn't take, didn't demand, didn't devour. They waited. They offered. They listened. I followed him back inside, his hand curled lightly around mine. Not holding, not leading, just there. Steady. I could have pulled away at any moment, and he knew it. That was the power in it. And maybe that was why I didn't. The house welcomed us like it had been holding its breath. The walls no longer felt like witnesses, but like silence folded into architecture. A low light burned in the kitchen, casting golden shadows across the marble. He moved without speaking, the ritual of tea calming his movements, anchoring the space between us. I sat at the edge of the long counter, not quite ready to relax, but no longer armored. My nightgown brushed my knees as I swung one leg slowly, the cotton clinging like the memory of touch. He set the cup in front of me, steam curling upward. Chamomile, I think. Gentle, unapologetic, just like him. I wrapped my hands around the porcelain to steal the warmth. You always this careful? I asked, voice quiet but edged with curiosity. His eyes met mine, slow and deliberate. Only with things I don't want to break. That stopped something in me. I looked down, let the heat of the tea mask the heat crawling up my neck. You think I'm fragile? No, he said, almost immediately. I think you're rare. I swallowed that too quickly, and it burned on the way down. You're not afraid of me? I whispered. He took a step closer, leaning one elbow on the counter, his face angled toward mine, but still inches away. Terrified. That made me look at him. Really look. His voice dropped lower, a hush made of gravity. You walk like you've already survived the end of the world. You speak like your throat remembers screaming. And your eyes, he paused, the weight of that breath like a hand pressed to my spine. Your eyes make me forget the sound of my own name. I didn't breathe for a full heartbeat. Maybe two. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't trying to seduce me. He was just telling the truth. And that truth slid under my skin like silk dipped in flame. Dante. I said his name because I wanted to taste it, needed to know what it felt like against my tongue now that I'd stopped pretending I hated the sound. His eyes flickered. His name in my mouth did something to him. He didn't move, didn't speak. So I did. You've never touched me the way others have. You've never even looked at me like that. But I know you think about it. I feel it in the air between us. He nodded, slowly. I think about it more than I should. Why don't you act on it? Because you haven't decided yet if you want me, or if you just want to rewrite your memories. I hated how clearly he saw me. I hated how safe it made me feel. But I'm here, I whispered. I stayed. I asked for you. His voice broke into something darker. And if I touch you, Sienna, if I let myself need you the way I do, there's no going back. I won't be gentle every time. I won't always know how to hold back. And I will want all of you. Not just your body, but your trust, your scars, your past. I stepped down from the counter. The floor was cold under my feet, but I didn't flinch. I've been given to men who didn't ask, I said, who didn't care if I shattered. I've been touched by hands that didn't know how to feel. So if you're going to touch me like I'm real, then don't you dare ask me to pretend I don't want it. His jaw clenched. His eyes closed like he was trying to trap something wild behind them. Then he opened them again, and all the restraint cracked just a little. You'll ruin me, he murmured. I smiled. You already ruined me first. And then the space between us was gone.
Her breath hit my throat before her lips did, and I knew, in that second suspended between restraint and surrender, that if I kissed her now, I'd never be able to unfeel it. I'd never erase the shape of her mouth against mine, the way her voice curved when she whispered my name like it was permission and warning all at once. But when her fingers found my collar, delicate but certain, I understood something deeper. She wasn't giving herself to me. She was reclaiming herself with me. And that made everything more dangerous. I didn't rush. I couldn't. Every second before the touch mattered more than the touch itself. I watched her eyes, waited for the flinch that never came. Instead, she tilted her head and parted her lips with a kind of defiance that shattered my discipline. So I kissed her. Once. Deep. Controlled. Then again, less so. And when she sighed into my mouth like she'd been holding that breath for years, I let the last of my restraint slip between our skin. My hands found her hips. The fabric of her nightgown was thin, too soft, too yielding beneath my palms. I dragged my fingers along her spine, just enough pressure to make her arch. She gasped, not in fear, not in pain, but like she'd remembered something her body thought it had lost. Her nails pressed into my chest, not sharp, not desperate, just real. present. And I knew then that this wasn't about possession. It wasn't about lust. This was worship. I broke the kiss to look at her. Her cheeks flushed, lips wet, pupils wide and blown open with something that wasn't just desire. It was trust, raw and trembling. "Are you sure?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Her nod was slow, steady. She wasn't falling. She was stepping, choosing, and I needed that more than I'd ever needed air. "Say it," I murmured, voice thick. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you." Those 4 words, they undid me. I lifted her into my arms, careful but certain, and carried her from the kitchen like she was the most fragile and most powerful thing I'd ever held. She wrapped around me without hesitation, head resting against my shoulder, breath brushing my neck like a promise that only I was allowed to keep. The bedroom door gave way beneath my foot. The world beyond it stopped existing. I set her down like a prayer, slow and reverent. She reached for me before I could step back, fisting her fingers into the front of my shirt like she didn't want to risk space opening up between us again. I let her undress me, slowly, quietly. Her hands weren't practiced, but they were purposeful. And when my shirt slid off my shoulders, I saw the way her gaze dropped, then rose. No shame, just curiosity, heat, acceptance. "You don't look afraid," I said softly. "I am," she replied, "but not of you." That nearly broke me in half. When I pulled the nightgown over her head, I did it like I was unwrapping something sacred. Her body was marked with stories no one should have had to survive. But she stood there, bare, unflinching, and more beautiful than anything I'd ever laid eyes on. She didn't try to hide. She didn't apologize for the past written on her skin. And I didn't look away. "You're perfect," I said. "I'm not," she whispered, "but I want to believe you." I took her hand, pressed it to my chest. "Then let me show you." We lay down together, and I moved slow. Every kiss, every breath, every inch of skin I touched, I did so with the full weight of meaning. I didn't just want to give her pleasure. I wanted to give her back her body, her voice, her right to feel without fear. And when she arched into me, whispering my name like it tasted right on her tongue, I almost lost my mind. But I didn't. I waited until she looked up at me with a kind of surrender that didn't come from weakness, but from strength. She guided me with her hands, with her breath, with her eyes. And when I finally pressed inside her, I did it like a vow, slow, deep, infinite. She gasped, clung, wrapped herself around me like she'd been waiting for this and didn't even know it. We moved together. No rush, no urgency, just heat, just sound, just 2 people trying to remember what it meant to feel without breaking. Her fingers dragged down my back, her mouth found my shoulder, and her hips met mine like she'd been made to fit there. She whispered things I'll never repeat, things too sacred to speak outside that moment. And when she shattered beneath me, she didn't cry. She breathed, fully, freely, for the first time, and I followed, pouring everything I'd ever been and ever wanted to be into her. After, she didn't roll away. She stayed curled against me, her legs tangled with mine, her breath steady, her fingers tracing circles on my chest. "I didn't know it could feel like that," she said. I kissed her hair. "Neither did I."
I had imagined pleasure before, not because I believed in it, but because the body learns how to pretend. It memorizes patterns, moans on cue, movements that make men believe they've conquered something sacred. I've given that kind of performance too many times to count. But this was nothing like that. There was no script for the way he held me afterward, no choreography in the way he stayed inside me as if leaving would ruin something delicate between us. I didn't feel claimed. I felt known. His breath was still uneven against my neck, his heartbeat echoing into the space where my ribs had once felt hollow. I traced it with the tip of my finger, slow, letting the silence stretch around us like a cocoon neither of us wanted to break. But silence has its own kind of sound. It hums, it pulses, it waits, and inside it, the thoughts always come. I wanted to ask him what this meant, what we were now. But the question felt too fragile, like a thread pulled too early would unravel something neither of us was ready to see undone. So I stayed quiet, let my lips rest against his collarbone, let my eyes close against the world for one moment more. Just one. When I finally spoke, my voice came out softer than I meant. Was that always yours? His head tilted slightly. What? The way you touched me. Like you weren't afraid of the broken parts. He exhaled slowly, one hand moving to my back, his fingers spreading wide like he was reminding me I could still be held. Maybe I am afraid, he said, but not enough to stop. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. My throat closed, not from sadness, but something else. Something heavier. Something closer to peace. I pulled the sheet over my chest as I sat up, not out of shame, but habit. His gaze followed, eyes dark with something unreadable, still gentle, but sharpened now, as if something inside him had shifted too. You're quiet, I said, not looking at him directly. So are you. I nodded. Do you regret it? No, his answer came so fast it cut through the air. Do you? I turned to him then. No, but I'm scared of what it makes me want. He sat up beside me, shoulders bare, voice low enough to make the candlelight feel warmer. And what is that? More. That word settled between us like a challenge. His hand reached for mine, tentative this time, like now that he'd touched all of me. The smallest gesture carried the most weight. I want more too, he said, but not if it costs you your breath. I looked at him, really looked, and realized that wasn't a line. That wasn't seduction. That was truth. I leaned in until our foreheads touched. I don't think you ruin things, I whispered, but I know how to ruin myself, and I don't want to do that to you. He didn't pull away. Then don't. Stay right here. We don't have to define anything. I don't want undefined. The word surprised even me. I want real. Even if it terrifies me. It terrifies me too. That made me smile. A small one. The kind that tugged at the corners of my mouth without permission. I pressed my lips to his again. Soft, slow, a seal instead of a spark. And when I pulled back, I whispered, I've never felt like I belonged anywhere. But here, like this, I almost believe I do. You do. He said it without blinking, without flinching. You do, Sienna. And somehow, the way he said my name made it feel like it belonged to me again. Like he hadn't taken it. Like he was giving it back. We lay back down, tangled beneath the sheets, not as a secret, not as a mistake, but as something dangerous and delicate that neither of us wanted to break. And I knew, deep in the quiet place inside me where the screams used to live, that I had already started choosing him, even if I didn't understand how. Even if I still woke up from dreams I didn't speak of. Even if the war inside me wasn't over. Because for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone.
I woke before her, not because the morning demanded it, but because something about the weight of her breath against my chest made sleep feel too fragile to trust. Her body curled around mine like she had always known how to fit there. One leg draped over my thigh, her cheek warm against my skin, her fingers loosely tangled at the base of my ribs, as if letting go completely still felt foreign. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I memorized the way her exhale shivered when my fingertips traced the slope of her spine. I wanted to freeze time right there. But the world, even in stillness, keeps turning. Outside, the wind whispered through the old shutters. Province waking slow, gentle, unaware that in this bed, the axis of everything had shifted. She stirred once, her mouth brushing against my chest, a sleepy sound rising in her throat, something between a sigh and a secret. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her body was already telling me more truth than I'd ever been trusted with. Her voice came barely above a breath. You're still here. I smiled against her hair. I told you I would be. She pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes heavy, lips parted. There was something different in her expression now. Not fear, not hesitation. It was stillness, sharp and rare, like her soul had stopped pacing the edges of the room. And in that silence, I felt something ancient move between us. A knowing, a tether. Her fingers slid up my chest, slow and hesitant, tracing the line of a scar she hadn't noticed the night before. Where did this one come from? I let out a soft breath, not because I didn't want to tell her, but because I hadn't expected the question. Syria. Years ago, my uncle thought I needed to learn how to kill without blinking. I learned instead how to disappear without dying. She nodded once. No judgment. No pity. I have scars too, she said, her voice flatter now. Most of them you can't see. I know. Her gaze sharpened. Do you? I met her eyes, held them there. I see them, even when you think I don't. Especially then. She lowered her forehead to mine, exhaled slow. I don't want to be handled, Dante. I want to be held. There's a difference. Then I'll never handle you. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. What happens now? The question wrapped around my throat like a noose. Because I knew what was coming. She didn't. I need to tell you something, I said, brushing her hair from her face. Something I should have told you from the beginning. She stiffened slightly, but didn't pull away. I didn't just buy you to protect you, I said. I was already there, watching, planning. That container, it was one of many. I've been dismantling the system from the inside. Her breath hitched. I continued, slowly, carefully, because I could feel the ground shifting beneath us. The laylos, the transport routes, the auctions. My family has been part of it for decades. But not me. Not anymore. I've spent the last 3 years tearing it apart. Quietly. Strategically. You were never supposed to end up back in their hands. She blinked once. Twice. Her hand slipped from my chest. You knew, she whispered. You knew and you didn't stop it. I tried. I failed. And then I fixed it the only way I could. She sat up, pulling the sheet with her, wrapping it around herself like armor. Her voice cracked. You let them take me. Even for a moment. No, I sat up too. I didn't let them. I couldn't reach you in time. You ran. You were so close. You should have told me. You weren't ready to hear it. I'm not ready now. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. She stood from the bed, bare feet silent against the stone floor. Her back to me. Her shoulders trembling just enough to make my heart fracture. You said I was safe. You are. Then why does it feel like the ground is falling out from under me again? I didn't have an answer. Not one that wouldn't sound like an excuse. So I stood. Walked to her. Close, but not touching. I will never lie to you again. Even if the truth costs me everything. She didn't turn. She just whispered, I need air. And then she was gone. Wrapped in my shirt, barefoot in my house, disappearing down the hall like she was chasing something only she could name. And I let her go. Because trust, sometimes, it has to walk away before it knows if it wants to return.
The hallway felt longer than it should have, like the walls stretched with every step I took away from him. I wasn't fleeing, not exactly. But I didn't know where I was going either. My feet moved because stillness was too loud, too dangerous. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed space that didn't echo with the sound of truths I hadn't asked for, but now couldn't unhear. The garden was darker tonight. The moon hung low, veiled behind clouds, casting everything in a hush of silver and shadow. I stepped into the cold barefoot, the stone biting at my skin, but I welcomed it. Pain was simple, familiar. It didn't lie. It didn't hold secrets in its hands or say things like I failed, but then I fixed it. I wrapped my arms around myself, not for warmth, but for control. Because my body still remembered his, every inch of it, every breath, every tremor. And it hurt, in a way that wasn't cruel. That was the problem. Nothing about what happened between us had been cruel. It had been beautiful, gentle, true, and that made the betrayal worse. He should have told me. Not after. Not in the glow of morning. Not after my body had learned the shape of his name and made it a refuge. He should have told me when I was still guarded. When I could have built the right walls to keep his softness from sinking so deep beneath my skin. The wind moved through the lavender. It whispered around my legs, dragged across my collarbone. My breath came sharp, tight, like my lungs didn't know how to stretch without him. I hated that I missed him already, that my body didn't understand the difference between anger and longing. It just knew he wasn't beside me. The night was too quiet, and my thoughts were too loud. You don't get to be furious at someone who saved you. That's what I told myself, over and over. He pulled me from something I would never fully name. He carried me from fire and gave me silk. But he also left me in that darkness long enough for the ash to settle on my skin. And now he wanted to wash it off with soft hands and whispered apologies. But part of me still wanted him to try. I sank to the ground, knees folding beneath me, the cold seeping into my bones. My hands pressed to the dirt, grounding me. I closed my eyes, and in the silence I saw his face. Not the one he shows the world, the one he gave only to me, the one that breaks a little every time I look at him like I might disappear. I remembered the tremor in his voice when he said, "I'll never lie to you again." The way his hand stayed open, never pulling, never forcing. I remembered how his breath caught when I asked for more, not like a man aroused, but like a man undone. He didn't own me, not even when I gave him everything. That was the difference. And that difference was the reason I couldn't stay angry. Not for long. Not when the truth tasted like something he hated carrying. Not when I knew, in the deepest part of me, the part that had forgotten how to feel safe, that he hadn't watched me suffer to teach me a lesson. He had watched me because he couldn't stop me. And then he'd followed and pulled me out. And maybe he told me too late. But he did tell me. And that mattered. I didn't hear his footsteps, but I felt them. Felt him before I saw him. The shift in the air. The warmth behind me. The ache between us. He didn't say my name. He just stood there. Close. Waiting. I didn't turn. But I spoke. "I'm angry with you." "I know," he said, quiet, steady. "And I don't trust you completely. I don't expect you to." My voice cracked. "But I still want you." Silence. Breath. Then, his voice, softer than I've ever heard it. "Then let me earn the rest." I closed my eyes, let his words settle like gravity into the hollows of my chest. I wanted to hate him. I really did. But hate had no place in the spaces he touched. It dissolved too fast. So I turned, and he looked at me like I was the only thing he still believed in. "Don't stand there like you're waiting to be punished," I whispered. "Just sit with me. Here. Now." He did. And we sat side by side, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the dark. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like an answer.
She didn't ask me to follow her, and I didn't ask her to forgive me. But we sat there, side by side, in the cold hush of night, like we'd agreed to something wordless. Her breath came slow, steady, and I listened to every exhale like it meant something. Like it mattered more than all the silence I'd filled with secrets. I didn't touch her, not because I didn't want to, but because trust grows in the spaces where restraint lives. The wind moved her hair across her face. I watched her tuck it behind her ear, her fingers delicate, trembling just enough to make my chest tighten. She was always beautiful, but here, in this quiet, wrapped in moonlight and the distance between almost and enough, she was something else entirely. She was becoming, and I was unraveling. "You're not the man I expected," she said softly, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "What did you expect? A buyer, a mask, a lie." I let the words settle, let them sting. "And what do you see now?" She tilted her head, barely. "A man trying to carry too many things at once." "I am. And why haven't you dropped any of them?" "Because the moment I do, someone dies." She looked at me then, finally, and I felt the weight of her stare in places I didn't know could ache. "That's not your burden alone." "It was never supposed to be," I said. "But it became mine the moment I saw what they were doing with our name." She nodded once. "So it's your family." "My uncle," I said, slowly. "He runs the operation beneath the surface, hidden under legitimate fronts, disguised in logistics, finance, real estate. I dismantle it from the inside, one piece at a time." "Why not go to the police?" "Because they're paid not to listen." Her lips curved, a humorless smile. "Of course they are." I turned toward her, elbows on my knees, voice low and even. "I've traced the next shipment. It's happening in 2 weeks. Eastern Europe. Girls from the Balkans, Syria, some taken from orphanage systems in the South. This one's different. Exclusive. Underground. Invitation only." Her pulse shifted. I heard it in the air between us. "A Leilau." "Yes." She went still, rigid, quiet. "I need someone inside," I said. "Someone who knows what they look for, how they watch, how they catalog." Her breath caught. "You want me to go back?" "No," I said instantly, sharply. "I don't want that. I would never ask that of you. But if you choose to, if you're willing, we can get them all. Not just the buyers, the suppliers, the distributors, the chain, everything. And you think I can bait them?" You wouldn't be bait, I said, turning fully toward her now. You'd be the trap. She stared ahead again. You once said I walk like I've survived the end of the world. I meant it. Then maybe I'm finally ready to turn around and face what's still burning. That silence after her words, it wasn't empty. It was alive. I reached into my coat, pulled out a sealed folder, and laid it beside her. Everything you'd need to know is inside. Names, places, the security layout. I've already secured a handler contact. She'll meet with you tomorrow if you say yes. She didn't open it, didn't touch it, but she whispered, "Will you be watching?" My voice caught, every second. And if something goes wrong, I burn the whole place to the ground. She closed her eyes, not in fear, in resolve, then stood and walked inside. She didn't take the folder, but she didn't leave it behind either. She left the door open, just wide enough for me to see the shift in her posture as she disappeared down the hall. Shoulders back, chin up, and I knew she'd already said yes. Not with her mouth, but with her spine.
I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because something had shifted inside me, subtle and irreversible. There's a silence that comes after survival, a stillness too profound to name, like the body finally realizing it doesn't have to fight, but hasn't yet remembered how to rest. I lay there with the folder untouched beside me, its weight not in paper, but in everything it represented. Power, choice, revenge, closure, maybe even redemption, if I still believed in things like that. I watched the moon crawl across the ceiling, its light silvering the edges of my thoughts. Somewhere he was awake too. I could feel it like a thread pulling taut between rooms. Dante didn't need to be near for me to sense him. His presence was carved into the rhythm of the house, into the breath of my own chest. He was silence, yes, but the kind that watches you without blinking, the kind that holds you without touching. By morning, I knew my answer, not because I wanted to be brave, but because I couldn't bear the thought of any other girl feeling what I had felt. Alone, owned, branded invisible. No one had come for me until Dante, and even then, only because he was already hunting the machine that swallowed me. The others wouldn't be so lucky, unless someone walked back into the fire holding a match and a map. I dressed in black. No makeup, no perfume, nothing that didn't belong to me. My body, finally mine again, still bore the memory of his touch, gentle, reverent, necessary. And that memory was a shield now. I wasn't walking into the next room as prey. I was walking in as the weapon they thought they'd already broken. Dante was waiting in the courtyard, leaning against the hood of the car, arms folded, dressed in that kind of quiet elegance that made him look both untouchable and dangerously human. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw everything I needed. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He didn't try to stop me. He simply opened the door. The drive was silent at first, not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that breathes between two people who no longer need to fill space with sound. His hand rested on the gear shift, close enough that my fingers ached to reach. But I didn't. I needed the silence. I needed the tension. Because underneath it was the truth neither of us wanted to say. This might not end the way we hope. "I'll be wired," I finally said, my voice steady. He nodded, eyes on the road. "She'll brief you. You'll never be out of range. And if I am," his jaw tightened, "you won't be." I turned to face him fully. "Dante." He glanced at me once, the way a man does when he knows what's coming and still hopes it won't be spoken aloud. "If something goes wrong," I said, voice barely more than breath, "don't save me. Finish the mission." "No, it's not about me anymore. It's always been about you." I looked away, but his voice followed me like heat. "You are not a casualty I'm willing to accept. And you are not a god," I whispered. "No," he said, "but I'm the man who found you, and I'll be the one who brings you back." We didn't speak after that. At the safe house, I met her, Isabel. Mid-30s, clipped French accent, eyes too old for her face. She didn't smile. I liked her immediately. She dressed me herself. No heels, no flashy lingerie. They didn't want glamour. They wanted something that looked just broken enough to taste expensive. She braided my hair in silence, tight against my scalp. And when she finished, she pressed the smallest wire behind my ear and looked me dead in the eye. "You scream, we come." "I won't scream." You might. Dante stayed in the hallway. He didn't watch. He didn't interfere. But when I stepped out, everything in his body changed. His posture, his breath, his eyes. He looked at me like he was memorizing a version of me he hoped would never exist again. I walked up to him and placed my hand flat against his chest. His heart was a drum, steady, wild, alive. I'm coming back, I said. He closed his hand over mine. I know. Then I stepped away and didn't look back, because if I did, I wouldn't have the strength to go.
I watched her walk away with the kind of stillness that doesn't belong to men like me. Men who burn. Men who break things with their hands when their hearts don't know how to speak. She didn't turn around, and I didn't call her back. But every step she took pressed deeper into my chest, carving her absence into something permanent. She wasn't dressed like herself, but she moved like a blade. Sharp, quiet, unapologetic. She was the most dangerous thing in that plan, and she was mine. I stayed outside long after the car took her away. The night felt too cold, too silent, too aware of the way I had just sent her back into the jaws of the thing I'd spent years trying to kill. I hated every second of it, but I knew her choice wasn't born of recklessness. It came from something far worse, clarity. She had seen the world from the inside of its ugliest rooms, and she still wanted to go back. Not to relive it, but to end it. Inside, Isabel set up the command center in the lower wing, screens glowing in the dim light. Her voice clipped and exact as she relayed protocol to the team. The room was clean, professional, efficient, but my body felt like war. Every flicker of movement on the monitors sent a ripple down my spine. Every breath in my lungs felt stolen. Then I heard her voice, faint, in my ear, like she was whispering directly into the hollow beneath my skin. I'm in. She didn't sound afraid. She sounded empty. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles burned. On screen, she moved through the entrance of the private estate like she belonged there, shoulders back, gaze low, steps calculated. No hesitation, just precision. The men at the door didn't touch her. They looked. Of course they looked. But even through grainy resolution, I saw it. None of them understood what they were letting in. She wasn't their next conquest. She was the reckoning they didn't see coming. She passed through a corridor lined with velvet and marble, each step echoing in my ears like a gun cocking. The guests were already gathering in the ballroom. Wealth slithered through every frame. Suits that cost more than most lives. Faces I recognized. Names I had memorized. Men who had sat at dinner tables with my family. Men who shook my uncle's hand and smiled as girls disappeared by the dozens. And then she was announced. No name, just a number. My stomach turned. She entered with her chin high and her eyes blank, the way survivors learn to walk when they know someone is watching. I'd seen that look on her before, but this time wasn't survival. It was strategy. She's close to the host, Isabel said. 2 meters. No security between. I leaned closer to the screen. My blood was effuse. Then he appeared. My uncle, Luciano Barisi. He hadn't aged. Still dressed in shadows. Still smiling like the devil, trying on a new face. He reached for her hand, slow, calculated, and kissed it. My jaw locked. My vision blurred. But Sienna didn't flinch. She tilted her head, smiled the way prey does when it's already set the trap. He said something I couldn't hear. She laughed. Too loud. Too bright. Perfectly fake. And in that moment, I saw the girl I found in a container turn herself into the woman who could end an empire. I stepped back from the screen, heart pounding like the walls of my chest were too small to contain it. She's in position, Isabel said. Do we proceed? I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was personal. It was blood, and it was almost over.
The room pulsed around me like a heartbeat I wasn't supposed to feel. Lights too soft, music too elegant, laughter too smooth to be real. Everything here was choreographed to disguise rot. And still, I walked through it like I belonged, my heels quiet against the marble, my face painted in the expression they expected. Not fear, not pain, just vacancy, polished and hollow. But under the silk, under the powder, under the stillness, I was fire, controlled, contained, waiting. Luciano's fingers were cold when they touched mine. He smiled like history didn't drip from his wrists, like girls hadn't disappeared beneath the weight of that mouth. His kiss to the back of my hand was slow, calculated. He didn't recognize me. Of course he didn't. Men like him never really see the girls they sell. You're exquisite, he said, his voice warm with poison. I smiled, tilted my head. Let the lie live on my tongue. I was told you prefer a challenge. He laughed, quiet and rich. And are you one? I suppose you'll find out. He leaned in closer. Too close. His cologne was sharp, expensive, and clinging to the scent of something colder. Something like metal. Or blood. You remind me of someone, he murmured. I held his gaze. No, I remind you of what you thought you buried. His eyes narrowed. And that was the first crack. My pulse thudded in my ear. Not panic. Power. Across the room, men watched. Some with interest. Some with anticipation. Some with that dull, detached stare of men who've forgotten the difference between luxury and cruelty. They didn't know that the walls were listening. That every corner was wired. That each step I took was dragging them closer to the fall. Isabel's voice was a whisper in my ear. 2 minutes. I nodded subtly, the movement disguised as a breath. Luciano offered his arm. I took it. Let him lead me deeper into the gilded belly of the monster. We passed paintings that cost more than lives. Statues of women with perfect, unmarked skin. He liked his trophies silent and still. He wouldn't like me. When we reached the staircase, he turned to me, eyes glinting. You've done this before. I shrugged. What makes you say that? You wear your skin too well. Girls like you usually hesitate. Maybe I've been trained better. He smiled again. Or maybe you were born for this. I leaned in, close enough for my lips to graze the shell of his ear. Or maybe I was born to destroy it. The detonation was silent at first, just a vibration underfoot. Then the lights flickered. Then screams. Chaos bloomed fast, like blood from a clean cut. I stepped back. Luciano reached for me, confusion cracking across his face. But I was already moving. Down the stairs, through the hall, toward the panic. Gunshots echoed like thunder cracking through glass. Dante's voice in my ear. Steady. Alive. I'm here. 3 words. Nothing else. But they hit harder than the explosions. I turned the corner just as the first man fell. Security hours. Moving like ghosts. Efficient. Lethal. Luciano shouted behind me. Something in Italian. Something broken. I kept walking. I didn't run. I didn't hide. Because this time, I wasn't the hunted. I was the storm.
I saw her before she saw me. Smoke curled in slow ribbons through the hallway, gilded chandeliers hanging above a battlefield dressed in suits and spilled blood. She walked through it untouched, hair wild, gaze fixed forward. Every inch of her radiated something I'd never seen in her before. Stillness like a blade, calm like vengeance. My heart didn't race when I spotted her. It stopped, just for a second, just long enough to remind me what fear actually felt like. She didn't flinch at the sound of gunfire, didn't pause when another man dropped beside her, his scream cut short by steel and strategy. She was made for this moment, and I realized this wasn't her breaking point. This was her resurrection. She was no longer the girl from the container, no longer the woman whose voice trembled when she said her own name. She was fire walking in flesh. Sienna. My voice cracked through the comms. Not loud, not urgent, just her name, like a tether, like gravity. She turned, slowly, eyes cutting through smoke and ruin until they found mine. And when they did, my breath left me. Not from relief, from reverence. I moved to her without thinking, hands tight on my weapon, shoulders high with tension. But when I reached her, when she stood in front of me, without a single bruise, without a single apology, I dropped the gun to my side. Are you hurt? It was instinct, even if I already knew the answer. She shook her head once. Not anymore. We didn't touch. Not yet. The air between us was too hot, too charged, too filled with the memory of what almost was, what could still be lost if I let my guard down for even one breath too long. Behind us, shouting. More shots. The walls trembled from the force of another blast. The estate was crumbling, piece by piece, secret by secret. And still, I couldn't take my eyes off her. "Luciano?" she asked. My jaw flexed. Cornered. Not dead yet. Her gaze narrowed, sharp enough to slice. "He won't go quietly." No, I stepped closer. "But he'll go." She looked at me like she wanted to believe it. Like she was weighing the fire in her chest against the future she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. I saw it. The war still flickering behind her eyes. The need for closure pressed tight against the fear of becoming what hurt her. "You don't have to be the one who ends him," I said. Her voice was quieter than the storm around us. "But I need to be the one who watches it happen." I nodded. "Then stay close." She didn't hesitate, didn't pretend to be brave. She just moved to my side. Steady, silent, certain. We descended the eastern corridor, flanked by my team, every door a potential ambush. My blood thrummed in rhythm with the sound of Sienna's steps beside me. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to protect something that didn't need saving. The inner chamber door stood at the end of the hall. Reinforced, thick, built to withstand siege. But not her, not me. I lifted my weapon. She placed her hand on my arm. "No more bullets," she whispered. "Not for him." I lowered it and kicked the door open. Smoke curled into the room first, swallowing the marble in shadow. And there he stood, Luciano, my uncle, my blood. He looked at me like I was a betrayal he'd been expecting. But when he saw her, his expression changed. Not with recognition, but with fear, real fear. And Sienna, she smiled. Nothing cruel, just final.
He didn't recognize me. Not really. Not the girl he sold. Not the girl he bruised. Not the silence he once owned like a brand. The years had carved lines into his face, but not enough to soften what lived behind his eyes. That cold calculation, that hunger to dominate anything that dared to breathe without permission. But I was breathing now, deeper, louder. With every step I took across the scorched floor, the echo of my heels sang like vengeance. And still, he didn't see me for what I was. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to strike. I just stood there, still, centered, and said his name. Luciano. He blinked. His mouth parted. And I swear for a moment he looked human. But it passed. His voice came low, almost amused. "You." The word curled around his tongue like he thought it still had power. I tilted my head. "Me." Behind me, Dante didn't speak. He didn't move. But I could feel the storm in his body, every breath a fuse, every muscle ready to ignite. I reached for his hand, not because I needed strength, but because I wanted to remind him I already had mine. Luciano's eyes dropped to our fingers laced together. He smiled, but it didn't reach anything inside him. "So this is what redemption looks like," he said, voice soaked in mockery. "No," I whispered. "This is what justice looks like." He laughed. That sound I'd heard once before in a room without windows when he promised I'd be forgotten. But I wasn't, and I wouldn't let the others be. Dante stepped forward, just once. His voice came like gravel and steel. "You're done, Luciano. Everything is gone. The network, the accounts, the buyers. We burned it all." Luciano's eyes flicked between us. "You think this ends with me?" "It begins with you," I said. "And that's enough." His gaze settled on me again. And this time he saw, not the body he used to own, not the girl stripped down and reshaped into silence. He saw the woman who had walked back into his world, holding the match. "You've changed," he murmured. I nodded. "No, I just remembered who I was before you tried to erase me." He took one step toward me. Dante raised his weapon without hesitation. Luciano stopped. His smirk faded. "There's no escape," Dante said. "We didn't come for a negotiation. We came for the ending." Luciano looked at me. "Will you be the one to kill me then? Is that how you finish your story?" I walked forward until I stood an arm's length from him. The room smelled of fire and marble and endings. I could have done it. Could have wrapped my fingers around that final moment and squeezed. But I didn't come to be like him. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to watch you fall." And then I turned away. Dante stepped past me, and the silence between them was made of blood. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I felt it, clean and final, the moment everything shattered. And when Dante returned to my side, hands empty, shoulders lighter, something in the air changed. We had buried the monster, but we hadn't buried ourselves with him. I met his eyes. He didn't speak. He just reached for me, and I let him.
I didn't ask if she wanted to watch him die. I didn't ask if she needed it. I knew. I saw in the way she stood, shoulders square, spine steady, hands unclenched. She wasn't waiting for violence. She was reclaiming the space he once occupied. The weight of it, the smell, the silence. And when she turned her back, when she walked away without flinching, I understood. Her revenge didn't need blood. It needed closure. And that was something only I could give her. He looked at me, and I didn't see my uncle anymore. I saw the chain, the legacy, the rot passed from man to man with money and handshakes and justifications dressed as business. I pulled the trigger without blinking. Once. Clean. Final. Not for hate. Not even for justice. But for her. So that when she looked at me again, I wouldn't still be carrying his shadow behind my eyes. And when I returned to her, she didn't speak. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me like I was already forgiven for everything that came before, and still unforgiven for everything I'd kept hidden. That was fair. That was us. The compound was burning behind us. Walls crumbling, smoke curling through gold-trimmed ceilings like memory, dissolving in fire. The sirens were close. The team had already cleared the last sector. We didn't run. We didn't hide. We walked through the heat and ruin like it had always been our ending. And maybe it was. But endings, I've learned, are never where you think they'll be. She sat beside me in the car, quiet, fingers threaded loosely in her lap, not touching mine but close. I could feel her breath before I heard it. Slow, grounded, like her lungs had finally remembered what air tasted like when it wasn't borrowed. I looked at her. She didn't meet my gaze. So I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. And that was enough. When we reached the villa, the staff vanished like ghosts. They knew, everyone did, that we weren't coming back the same, that silence would fill every room until one of us broke it. She stood at the edge of the garden, where the lavender was overgrown and fragrant, the wind moving through her hair like fingers I didn't dare mimic. I stepped behind her, close enough for her to feel me, not close enough to steal her solitude. I don't know what happens now, I said softly. She turned to me slowly, her expression unreadable. Neither do I, but her hand found mine again. She guided it to her chest, over her heart, and held it there. It was steady, alive, and I felt something in me settle. Not because the war was over, but because for the first time, I wasn't alone in what came next. She looked at me, voice barely above the breeze. I want to build something. My throat tightened. With me. With myself first, she said. But yes, with you, if you'll wait for me to be whole. I stepped forward then, lifted her hand to my mouth, kissed it slowly. I haven't waited this long to let you walk away now. She smiled, and I swear the sun came back just to catch it. Then stay, she whispered. Stay until it's real. I will. And I meant it. Because what we had now wasn't survival. It was choice. It was love growing from ash, reaching for light, and this time rooted deep enough to hold.
Florence doesn't whisper, it lingers. In the stone beneath your feet, warm even at night. In the air, thick with rosemary and ancient dust. In the quiet between bells and breath. I had never imagined it this way. Not without panic pressing against my ribs. Not without calculating exits or scanning faces for threats. But here, now, wrapped in a linen dress I chose, barefoot on a balcony overlooking a city older than everything that ever tried to ruin me, I was still. And stillness, I've learned, is its own kind of revolution. Dante is inside, making coffee, shirtless, slow, familiar, as if the world was never on fire, as if his hands never had to hold a gun and a promise in the same grip. There's music playing, low and steady, some forgotten jazz record crackling through the speakers like memory dressed in rhythm. And I wonder if it's possible to fall in love with sound, with the way his breath changes when he thinks I'm not listening, with the soft scrape of his fingers through his hair when he reads, with the pause before he says my name. We've been here 5 days. No schedules, no shadows, just sun-warmed sheets and stolen fruit and the kind of silence that doesn't ache. We don't speak about what we've done, about what we buried. The world we burned down isn't welcome here. This space is something we built from the ashes, unspoken, undisturbed. And every morning, when I wake to find his arm draped over my waist, his mouth against my shoulder, I wonder how something so soft could survive inside a man like him. He steps onto the balcony, 2 cups in hand, his eyes finding mine like they always do, like they never stopped. He doesn't ask what I'm thinking. He already knows. He passes me a cup, his fingers brushing mine. I feel the spark even now, even after all this time. And it isn't urgency anymore. It's certainty, a steady burn instead of a wildfire. And I let it warm me from the inside out. You're quiet this morning, he says, voice a little raspier than usual. I'm thinking. Dangerous habit. I smile over the rim of my cup. Not all thoughts hurt. His hand finds the back of my neck, thumb tracing that place where fear used to live. What kind of thoughts, then? I tilt my face toward him, let the sun catch my cheekbones. About how far we've come. About the girl I used to be. About the man I didn't expect you to be. He leans in, forehead resting against mine. And do those thoughts still ache? I close my eyes. No, they feel distant, like someone else's echo. He kisses me, slow and silent, and I forget how to carry anything but this moment. Later we walk, through markets and narrow streets. His hand never leaves mine. Tourists pass. No one recognizes him. No one sees me as anything but a woman in love. And for once, I believe that's all I am. A woman. In love. Not healing. Not surviving. Just here. We pass a little girl chasing pigeons. Her laughter slices through the air, sharp and pure. I stop walking. Dante notices, turning back, his gaze softening when he sees the look on my face. What is it? He asks. I shake my head, swallowing the emotion pressing against my throat. Nothing. It just reminded me what freedom sounds like. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He just pulls me in, arms wrapped tight, forehead against mine once more. And I whisper into his chest, barely loud enough for the wind to carry, this is what surviving was for. He exhales like it's the first real breath he's taken in years. And I know without question that we've made it. Not because the pain is gone, but because love stayed, even when everything else tried to leave.
She's in the field, barefoot again, the hem of her dress brushing against her calves as the lavender bends for her, like it always has. The wind catches her hair, carries it across her face, and she doesn't move to tame it. She's too focused on the little body in her arms, soft and warm and quiet now after too much laughter. Our daughter is curled against her shoulder, thumb tucked near her mouth, eyes drifting towards sleep, and Sienna sways without realizing it, hips moving in the rhythm of instinct, of love she once swore she wasn't capable of. I lean against the frame of the doorway and let the moment burn itself into me. No urgency, no violence. Just this, just her, just them. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel the need to guard it. There's nothing left to protect them from. I already burned that world to the ground. The sky is falling into evening, soaked in gold and lavender and the kind of stillness that once would have made me restless. But not anymore. Stillness feels different now. It isn't silence, it's peace. It's the quiet earned after surviving, after choosing love again and again, even when it trembled in your hands. She turns just slightly, sensing me. Her eyes meet mine from across the field, and they haven't changed. Still dark, still endless, still the only thing in this life that ever made me drop my weapons without being asked to. I walk toward her slowly, dragging my fingers through the blooms until I reach her. Our daughter shifts in her arms, sighs, then settles. She fought her nap, Sienna murmurs, her voice low, warm, wrapped in sunlight. She gets that from you. She smirks, eyes flicking to mine. You think I fight sleep? I think you fought everything except love. Her gaze softens, but she doesn't deny it. She doesn't need to. We know each other too well for lies. I reach for her waist, my palms spreading across the curve of her hip. She leans into it without hesitation, without question. My other hand touches the small of our daughter's back, and for a moment, the three of us are still, our breaths folding into one another. "What do you see?" she asks, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "When you look at us like that," I press my lips to her temple, then speak against her skin. "I see everything I never thought I'd be allowed to want." Her fingers curl into my shirt. "We built this." "I know. From ashes. From hell." I whisper. "And from hope." The sun slips lower. Our daughter stirs, then finally lets go and sleeps fully in Sienna's arms. I take her gently, carry her back toward the house. Sienna follows behind me, barefoot, silent, trailing the scent of lavender and the memory of everything we've been through. Inside, the walls are warm. Pictures on shelves. Books she reads aloud at night. A blanket on the floor where she sometimes lays with our girl and tells her stories about stars and oceans and how to be brave without becoming hard. There is no past here, not in the way it used to haunt. It lives in the corners, yes, but not as a threat. As a reminder, as weight we no longer drag, but we're like armor made of something softer. When Sienna joins me in the doorway of our daughter's room, she rests her head on my shoulder and exhales like it's the end of a long story. "She's safe," she whispers. "She's loved," I say. "She'll never know what I knew." "No, I promise. She'll only know what we chose instead." She turns to face me then, hands on my chest, eyes burning with something deeper than memory. "You gave me this," she says. "No," I breathe. "You gave this to yourself. I only stood still long enough for you to remember how to walk toward it." She kisses me. Slow, certain, not as reward, not as closure, but as continuation, a vow rewritten in every breath. And when she pulls away, I say it, not because it's needed, but because I want her to hear it again, always. I do it all over again. Even the pain, even the silence, even the fire. If it let me hear, to her, to this, to everything. Thank you for staying until the end. You have no idea how much your presence here means to me. In a world that moves too fast and forgets too easily, the fact that you listened, truly listened, that changes everything. If this story stirred something in you, even the smallest flicker, leave a trace. A like, a comment, a whisper that says, "I'm here." It matters more than you know. Every time you interact, you help this story find someone else who might need it. Someone walking through their own silence, searching for a voice to remind them they're not alone. And if your heart feels generous, share it with a friend, in a message, anywhere love still has a chance to be heard. Because maybe, just maybe, stories like this can soften something in the world. Maybe a single gesture, yours, can be the reason someone chooses to believe again. Thank you for being part of this. You're seen. You're welcome. Always.